What's up, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, Jessica Marie, and I'm here to enjoy something more pleasant, something I really like. I hope you guys enjoy this too. This is Messed Up Origins of Humpty Dumpty, Fables Explained. This is by John Solo. I love his content. This is the kind of stuff I enjoy knowing. We all know there's a true backstory to everything, so let's check it out.
Might want to sit down for this one because today I'm coming at you with our first messed up origin story that doesn't have its own Disney adaptation, Humpty Dumpty. You remember Humpty Dumpty, right? He sat on a wall, he fell off it, he might have been an egg. Of course you remember him, and I bet you could recite the poem off the top of your head without even really thinking about it. It's just one of those things where you hear it so often while growing up, it gets ingrained in your brain to a point where you don't even remember where or when you heard it for the first time. Like the Empire jingle. So that's what I wanted to explore today. Who is Humpty Dumpty? Where did his sad little story come from? Why does everyone think he's an egg even though he's never explicitly described as such? Before we dive headfirst into history, I gotta ask the Solo fam to do what you guys do best and smash that like button with all your heart. If we get at least 7,000 likes on this episode, I'll take it as a sign from you guys that you want more content like this in addition to the Disney stuff. You've all been shattering the 5,000 like goal I've been setting for the past few weeks, so I've got to set the bar extra high for this one. Also make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and ring that bell to be notified about new messed up content coming to your sub box every week. As you might expect, there are several versions of the classic Humpty Dumpty story we all know and love, which, speaking of, goes like this. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. That sounds like the one you knew as a kid, right? More or less? According to the Oxford Dictionary of Nursery Rhymes, this is the most commonly known version of the rhyme for today's English speakers, but it wasn't the first. The first version on record came from Samuel Arnold's 1797 children's book, Juvenile Amusements. In that book, the rhyme was actually posed as a riddle where the reader was supposed to guess what Humpty Dumpty was. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. 80 men and 80 more could not make Humpty Dumpty where he was before. Can you guess what the answer is? If you said egg, you're probably right, but we can't say for sure because Samuel Arnold decided not to include the answer with the riddle. Don't ask me why. Apparently more logic was put into Laffy Taffy wrappers than his book. As it turns out, there may have actually been a reason why Samuel Arnold didn't include the answer, and that's because at that time, everyone already knew it. Similar to the Three Little Pigs story we talked about last week, which had always been told orally before James Halliwell Phillips included it in the Nursery Rhymes of England collection. Before being put into writing, Humpty Dumpty was a popular playground rhyme that kids would often say to each other. Remember doing that stuff when you were a kid? One of your friends would come up to you and say, spell I cup, and you would say ICUP, and everyone would be like, ew, he watches people pee, and start laughing like chimpanzees. That's the kind of thing Humpty Dumpty was, but it wasn't as mean. Or here's a better example. One time in first grade, my friend Lucas came up to me and was like, how many fingers am I holding up? I answered 5, and he said, nope. Thumb's not a finger. Aren't kids the worst? You see, back in the 17 and 1800s, the term Humpty Dumpty had a few different meanings. It referred to a popular alcoholic beverage consisting of brandy boiled with ale, and it was also used as slang to refer to a short, clumsy person. So these two definitions may have served as misdirection for whoever heard the riddle. It's kind of strange for us to think about, but back then, it was actually possible to know what Humpty Dumpty was slang for before knowing the rhyme. So you might instinctively guess he was either a person or a mixed drink. And then you find out he's an egg and you're like, well, While most people have come to accept Humpty Dumpty as an unfertilized organic vessel that normally contains the zygote in which an animal embryo develops, an egg, there are some experts who believe that Humpty Dumpty was inspired by a real-life person or thing. In The Real Personages of Mother Goose, Catherine L. West Thomas suggested that Humpty was inspired by the real-life King Richard III of England, who was defeated at Bosworth Field in 1485 and was known for being hunchbacked and having fragile limbs. Now, the actual severity of his deformities are still exaggerated to this day, probably thanks to Shakespeare's play The Tragedy of King Richard III, which portrays him as having a severe hunchback, a limp, and a withered arm. Real first-hand accounts say that he had one shoulder slightly higher than the other, which affected his posture and overall shape, thus the comparisons to an egg. There's also been several theories that have since been debunked, suggesting that Humpty Dumpty was the nickname for an old piece of military weaponry. The first theory of this type was posited by Professor David Daub for a series of spoof nursery rhyme histories for Oxford Magazine in 1956, emphasis on spoof. He claimed Humpty Dumpty was a siege engine used in 1643 during the English Civil War to breach the walls of the city of Gloucester, and took some comically massive leaps in logic to prove his point. Even though his theory was never supposed to be taken seriously, the joke may have been a little too subtle for the average person, and before long it became a local legend in the city that some residents still believe to this day. What's fascinating is that Daub's theory inspired a series of copycats where cities from all around England took credit for being the home of the Humpty Dumpty canon. And then in 1996, another awfully similar explanation was posted on the official website for the city of Colchester, England. They said the rhyme was inspired by a massive cannon that was placed on a church wall and used by the royalists to defend themselves from the rebelling parliamentarians in the siege of 1648. The royalists, aka all the king's horses and all the king's men, tried to put the cannon on another wall, but it was so heavy they couldn't put Humpty together again. It should be mentioned that author and historian Albert Jack claimed to have confirmed this theory in his book Pop Goes the Weasel, The Secret Meaning of Nursery Rhymes, so you may have heard this story stated as fact. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it turns out that Albert Jack left out some pretty important details and seemingly made some up too. First off, he claims to have found the original poem in a 17th century book in an old dusty library, but doesn't give any other information to cite his source. On top of that, he claims to have found two lost verses that provide the poem with extra context. In 1648, when England suffered the pains of state, the Roundheads lay siege to Colchester town, where the king's men still fought for the crown. There, One-Eyed Thompson stood on the wall, a gunner of deadliest aim of all. From St. Mary's Tower his cannon he fired, Humpty Dumpty was its name. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Do you see the connections to Professor Daub's joke theory? Instead of the attackers using the Humpty Dumpty weapon, this time it's the defenders. Instead of a siege engine, it's a cannon manned by One-Eyed Thompson. Instead of city walls, it's a fortified church. But there's no mention of the cannon being especially large or called Humpty Dumpty, or there being a traditional rhyme about it. It's easy to see how Albert Jack could have connected these events to the story. As the old saying goes, when you have a hammer, everything becomes a nail. In other words, because he was looking for the real-life story that inspired Humpty Dumpty, it's not surprising he found a story to fit that bill, even though in actuality there was nothing special or unique that would connect that specific story to the Humpty Dumpty rhyme. I mean, how many soldiers using average-sized cannons do you think were killed back then? Thousands, guaranteed. So what makes this specific soldier connected to Humpty Dumpty? Nothing. And let's not forget, those lost verses he found are not written in the same style as those from the 17th century. They use different terminology than existed back then. And the cherry on top is the third verse with all the king's horses and all the king's men is not even how the rhyme was written back then. Remember, those original lines were fourscore men and fourscore more could not make Humpty Dumpty where he was before. The king's horses and king's men line wasn't commonly used until the 1900s, so I don't know what dusty old library these verses came from, but I'm gonna go ahead and say they're fake.
Okay.
So at this point, you're probably thinking, John, I didn't watch this episode to hear 3 debunked theories about Humpty Dumpty. I want to hear the actual origin story. Trust me when I say I'm right there with you. The fact of the matter, though, is Humpty Dumpty might not have a place in the real world like we thought. It sure would be rad if he was inspired by a king or a siege engine or a giant cannon, but all evidence points to this being a simple playground riddle rhyme from the 1700s about an egg that falls off a wall. Every other theory I've researched has been either debunked or is inconclusive. Even though I love a good messed up origin story, there's something about Humpty's humble origins that I can't help but appreciate. When you think about how well known this rhyme is in the English language and how prevalent the Humpty Dumpty character has been, first appearing in Lewis Carroll's novel Through the Looking Glass, making a very brief cameo in Disney's Mother Goose Melodies, and eventually being featured in the critically acclaimed Puss in Boots. Imagine going back in time and telling those kids from the 1700s that rhyme they used to trick each other would someday end up in a movie. They'd be like, what's a movie? And that will do it for today's episode of Messed Up Origins. I hope you enjoyed it, because if you didn't, I wasted a whole lot of time. By the way, I've got some exciting news. This will be the last video that I film in Illinois. I'm filming this.
Okay, you guys. That was really interesting. I did think Humpty Dumpty was going to have a deeper origin, but it seems like it might have just been a nursery rhyme that someone wrote up, or a riddle, as he said, and that's what it is. But I always thought Humpty Dumpty was kind of like, it was almost like, why was he on the wall in the first place? I always wondered that, but I guess there's no deep meaning to it. I wish there was. So tell me guys how you guys enjoyed this video. Um, let me know if you guys have any other content that you'd like me to put up. It is so late over here where I'm at. I think it's almost 1 in the morning. So, if there's any other videos you guys would like me to check out and react to, please send them to me. Leave it in the comment section below. And with that, I will say please like, comment, and subscribe, share. And with that being said, stay safe, stay blessed. I gotta get out of here and get some rest. That was a rhyme. Hey. Yeah, but honestly, stay safe, stay blessed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, y'all. Have a good one. Bye.